Christmas is supposed to be a day of love, but mine turned into a moment I will never forget and never forgive. Right in front of everyone, my aunt handed gifts to every single child in the room except my son. When I asked her why, she didn't even whisper. She said, "Because he's adopted," like it was the most normal thing in the world. That one sentence cut deeper than any knife, and in that moment, I knew this Christmas would end very differently than she expected. My name is Sarah, and I live in Ohio with my husband, Mark, and our 8-year-old son, Jacob. Jacob came into our lives when he was just a baby. He's not our blood, but he's our heart. We've loved him from the first day we held him, and not once in these 8 years did I think someone in my family would treat him differently. Especially not my own Aunt Diane. She has always been the loudest at family gatherings, always acting like the fun aunt with jokes, games, and expensive gifts for the kids. Jacob loved her. He would run to her every Christmas. But this year, something was different. The morning started beautifully. Snow was falling outside, the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the house, and Christmas music played softly in the background. My husband was wearing his silly Santa hat, Jacob was in his green pajamas with little reindeers, and I was in the kitchen making hot chocolate for everyone. Family started arriving around 10 a.m. My parents, my brother, my cousins, and finally, Aunt Diane with her big red bag of gifts. Everything felt normal at first. Everyone hugged, took off their coats, and settled in. The kids ran to the Christmas tree, eyes sparkling with excitement. Diane started pulling out brightly wrapped presents, calling out each child's name. "For Emma, for Lucas, for Sophie." The kids squealed with joy as they tore the wrapping paper. I stood there smiling, sipping my cocoa, waiting for Jacob's turn, but his name never came. At first, I thought maybe she had placed his gift somewhere else. Maybe it was in her car. Maybe she had forgotten it in the kitchen. I glanced at Jacob, who was sitting patiently, waiting for his name to be called. He had that polite little smile he always wears when he's trying to be patient. My chest tightened. I asked her casually, "Diane, is Jacob's gift in another bag?" She looked straight at me, then at Jacob, and said, "Oh, I didn't get him anything this year." The room went quiet. I could feel every pair of eyes on us. I tried to laugh, thinking maybe she was joking, but her face was stone cold. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. That's when she said it, clear, loud, and without shame. "Because he's adopted. He's not really family." My brain froze. Did she just say that? In front of my son? In front of the entire family? My hands shook. Jacob's smile faded, and I saw his little shoulders sink. He looked down at the floor like he was trying to disappear. That image will haunt me forever. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to throw her out of my house right then and there. But I looked at Jacob, and I knew I had to keep it together. This was supposed to be a happy day for him. I didn't want him to see me lose control. So I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and said, "Okay, everyone, let's finish opening presents." Inside, my heart was breaking into a million pieces. For the rest of the gift exchange, Jacob just sat quietly. Every time another kid opened a toy or a game, I saw him glance at it, then look away. Mark sat next to him, rubbing his back gently. My parents looked furious, but they stayed silent too, maybe trying to keep the peace. But peace was already gone. The damage had been done. Later, while everyone was eating lunch, I stepped into the hallway to get some air. My hands were still shaking. I wanted to walk out into the snow and scream. How could someone be so cruel to an innocent child? Jacob never did anything wrong. All he's ever done is love this family. I thought about confronting Diane right there, but I knew it would cause a scene and ruin the day even more. So I decided I would deal with her later when the kids weren't watching. Halfway through the afternoon, Jacob came to me and asked, "Mom, is it because I'm adopted?" His little voice cracked and my heart shattered. I knelt down, hugged him tight, and whispered, "No, sweetheart. It's because some people don't understand what family really means. But you are my son. You will always be my son." I could feel his tears soak my sweater. I wanted to take away his pain, but all I could do was hold him. Right about here in my story, if you're listening, I just want to say, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story can travel. Because maybe, somewhere, someone who needs to hear it will. When the day finally ended and people started leaving, I walked into the living room to clean up wrapping paper. That's when I saw it on the couch, half under a cushion, was a small piece of paper. I picked it up and realized it was a gift receipt. from Aunt Diane. It was for one of the expensive toys she had given to another child. I froze, staring at it. And then an idea came to me. I decided I was going to use this receipt as the perfect way to make my point. I would confront her, not with yelling or insults, but with something she couldn't ignore. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her step back over it like nothing happened. This wasn't just about Jacob anymore. It was about teaching her, and maybe the rest of the family, what real family is. As I held that receipt in my hand, I felt my anger turn into a calm, steady fire. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I also knew I had to wait for the right moment. Tomorrow would be that moment. And when it came, Aunt Diane was going to understand exactly what she had done. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jacob's face when he asked me if it was because he was adopted. The hurt in his eyes burned into my mind. I lay there staring at the ceiling while Mark slept beside me, my thoughts racing. I could hear the faint sound of wind outside, snow hitting the window, but inside my head it was chaos. I kept replaying Aunt Diane's voice over and over, because he's adopted. It didn't sound like ignorance. It sounded like a choice, like she meant to hurt him. Around 3 a.m, I sat up in bed and reached for my phone, opening the Notes app to write down exactly what I wanted to say to her. I didn't want my anger to take over in the moment. I wanted my words to be sharp but controlled. I also thought about the gift receipt sitting on the nightstand. That small slip of paper felt like a weapon. Not the kind that hurts physically, but the kind that makes someone face their own cruelty. I imagined handing it back to her with a message so clear she would never forget it. By the time the sun came up, my plan was ready. First, I'd call her, tell her I found the receipt and ask her to come over. Then, I'd give it back to her in person, but I wouldn't hand it alone. I'd also give her something else. A letter. Not a casual note, but a direct, painfully honest letter explaining how her words affected Jacob and exactly why she wouldn't be invited to our Christmas next year. This wasn't revenge. This was protection for my son and for the kind of home I wanted to give him. When Mark woke up, I told him my plan. He rubbed his face and sighed. "Sarah, you know she's going to make a scene, right?" I nodded. "Let her. She made a scene yesterday, just quieter. This time she can feel what we felt." He didn't argue, he just said, "I'm with you." That afternoon, I called Diane. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sickly sweet like nothing had happened. "Hey, Sarah, great party yesterday." I didn't waste time. "I found something of yours," I said flatly. "A gift receipt. Can you come pick it up tomorrow?" She hesitated, probably wondering why I didn't just mail it. Sure. What time?" I told her 2 p.m. and hung up before she could ask anything else. For the rest of the day, I worked on the letter. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, my pen scratching across the paper. I wrote about the moment she said those words, the way Jacob's shoulders sank, how quiet he was for the rest of the day. I wrote about what adoption means, about how love isn't measured in blood but in commitment and care. I told her she had no right to decide who was or wasn't family in my home. And then I ended it with one simple, final sentence. "You are not welcome at next year's Christmas or any year after until you understand the meaning of family." I folded the letter and put it in an envelope, then placed the gift receipt inside it. I stared at it for a long time, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't easy for me. Diane was my aunt, part of my life since I was born. But now she was a danger to my son's heart. The next day I made sure Mark and Jacob were out of the house when Diane came. I didn't want Jacob anywhere near her until she made things right, and honestly I doubted she ever would. At 1:55 I heard her car pull up in the driveway. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hey," she said, smiling. She looked around like she expected to be invited in. I didn't move. "Here," I said, holding out the envelope. Took it, glancing at it with confusion. "What's this?" "The receipt you left behind," I said, my voice steady, "and something else you need to read." She started to open it right there, but I stopped her. "No, read it in your car." Her smile faltered. "Sarah, what is this about?" I met her eyes, and for the first time in my life I didn't see family when I looked at her. I saw someone who hurt my child. "It's about what you said yesterday, and how you're not invited to Christmas next year." She blinked, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. Finally, she scoffed. "You're really going to do this over one comment?" My voice sharpened. "One comment? That one comment told my son he's not family. That's not a slip-up, Diane, that's cruelty, and I won't let it happen again." She looked like she might say something, but then she just turned and walked down the steps to her car, the envelope still in her hand. I watched from the doorway as she got in, shut the door, and sat there for a moment before driving away. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. The next day, my phone started blowing up. My cousin called first, saying Diane was furious and telling everyone I overreacted. Then my mother called, her voice heavy with disappointment, not in me, but in Diane. "She's trying to make it sound like you attacked her," my mom said. "But we were all there. We know what she said." Over the next few days, I got more calls and messages from family members. Some were on my side, telling me I did the right thing. Others tried to guilt me, saying Christmas was about forgiveness and I should just move on. But I wasn't going to move on. Not while Jacob still looked at me every night like he was waiting for someone else to tell him he belonged. That week, I focused on my son. We went sledding, built a snow fort, watched movies. I made sure he felt loved every single moment. And slowly, I saw the light come back into his eyes. Still, the wound was there. I could feel it. And I knew this wasn't the end of the drama. Diane wasn't the kind of person to just let things go. Something told me she was going to try to turn this around on me in a big way. I just didn't know how yet. But when it happened, I'd be ready. I thought maybe after a few days things would calm down, but I was wrong. It started with little ripples. Text messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly checking in but slipping in questions like, "Did you really uninvite Aunt Diane for next year?" Or, "Isn't that a bit much?" Then the calls began. My cousin Laura called me one morning while I was making pancakes for Jacob. She didn't even say hello before blurting out, "Sarah, you know Diane is telling everyone you humiliated her, right?" I took a deep breath. "Laura, I didn't humiliate her. She humiliated my son." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then Laura sighed. "I know what she said was wrong, but you know how she is. She doesn't think before she speaks." My voice was calm but sharp. "Laura, this isn't about thinking before you speak. It's about believing something so cruel that you feel comfortable saying it out loud to a child." She didn't argue, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. She changed the subject quickly and got off the phone. I had a feeling she wasn't on my side. By the afternoon, I had messages from 3 other relatives. Some were subtle. "We should all move on from this, especially for the kids." But others were outright hostile. My uncle's text read, "Family forgives. If you can't, maybe you're the problem." That one made my blood boil. Maybe I'm the problem? No. The problem is that people think forgiveness means pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness doesn't mean putting my son back in the path of someone who hurt him. Still, it was clear Diane was working hard to paint me as the villain. She had always been good at twisting stories to make herself look like the victim. I could practically hear her voice in my head. "I just didn't get him a gift, and she threw me out of Christmas forever." Of course she wouldn't tell them the real reason, that she told an 8-year-old boy he wasn't family. 2 days later, the situation exploded. My mother called me, her voice tight. "Sarah, there's a family group chat you're not in. Diane just posted a long message about you." I frowned. "What did she say?" My mom sighed. "She said you embarrassed her, that you attacked her character over a small misunderstanding, and that you're trying to cancel her from the family." My stomach twisted. Cancel her. "This isn't a social media thing. This is about Jacob." Mom's voice softened. "I know, honey, but some people are believing her." That night, Mark and I sat at the kitchen table after Jacob went to bed. "What do we do?" he asked. I rubbed my forehead. "I'm not going to chase them down to explain myself. The truth is, the people who know us will believe us. The ones who believe her, maybe they were never really in our corner." He nodded but didn't look satisfied. "I just hate that this is turning into some big family war." I hated it too, but I wasn't about to back down. The next morning, I woke up to see that one of my cousins had tagged me in a Facebook post. My heart sank. It was a long, passive-aggressive post about family members who hold grudges and how the spirit of Christmas is about second chances. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Everyone knew. I was tempted to reply, but I stopped myself. Social media fights never end well. Instead, I called my mom and told her, "I'm not going to get into it online. If people want to hear the truth, they can call me directly." But the tension didn't just stay online. At Jacob's school pickup, I ran into my cousin Ashley, who lives in the same neighborhood. She walked over, arms crossed. "Sarah, seriously, you banned Aunt Diane. You know she didn't mean it like that." I stared at her, trying to keep my cool. "Ashley, she told my son he's not family. How exactly did she mean it?" Ashley opened her mouth, then shut it. She muttered something about blowing things out of proportion and walked away. That night, Mark told me maybe it was time to cut certain people off. If they can't see what happened for what it is, maybe they're not worth our energy, he said. He was right, but part of me still felt betrayed. These were people I grew up with, people who were at my wedding. And now they were siding with someone who hurt my child. A few days later, I got a call from Diane herself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sarah," she started, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything, so she continued. "I think we both overreacted. I shouldn't have said what I said, but you shouldn't have uninvited me from Christmas. Let's just call it even." My jaw tightened. Call it even. "Diane, you told an 8-year-old boy that he's not part of his family. There is no even here." She sighed, her voice turning sharp. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. He's a kid, he'll forget." My voice rose without my permission. "He won't forget, Diane, I won't forget, and you're still not coming to Christmas." There was a long pause before she muttered, "Fine, then you're the one ruining this family," and hung up. After that, I knew the bridge between us was gone. But instead of feeling sad, I felt lighter. I didn't need her toxicity in my life, or in Jacob's. Still, the family drama wasn't going away. People kept calling, texting, hinting that I should just let it go. But I wasn't going to let it go. I knew in my gut that if I gave in now, Jacob would grow up thinking it's okay for people to treat him differently because he's adopted. I refused to teach him that lesson. Mark and I decided to plan something special for New Year's Eve, just the three of us. We decorated the living room with string lights, baked cookies, and watched movies until midnight. Jacob laughed more that night than he had all Christmas week. I realized then that we didn't need a big, messy family gathering to have joy. We could create our own traditions, ones filled with love, not cruelty. But just when I thought things were settling down, a letter came in the mail. It was from my grandmother. I hadn't heard from her in months, and my hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was long, handwritten, and careful. She said she loved me, she loved Jacob, but she also loved Diane, and she didn't want to see the family broken. She begged me to make peace, even if I didn't mean it, just so things could go back to normal. I stared at the words, "go back to normal," for a long time. Normal? Was normal letting my son be treated like less than family? Was normal swallowing hurt so others could stay comfortable? If that was normal, then I didn't want it. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't know what the next family gathering would look like, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down. And as the new year began, I had a feeling Diane wasn't finished trying to twist the story. It was the second week of January when the next blow came. Winter in Ohio meant gray skis, icy roads, and days that seemed to drag on forever, but I was starting to feel some peace again. Jacob was back in school, Mark was busy with work, and I had thrown myself into organizing the house as a distraction from the family drama. But on a Tuesday morning, I got a call from my cousin Laura that made my stomach drop. "Sarah," she said in a rush, "you need to know what Diane is planning." I stopped folding laundry and sat on the couch. "What now?" Laura hesitated like she was afraid to be the messenger. "She's organizing a family meeting at Grandma's house this Saturday. She says it's to clear the air, but honestly, it sounds like she's trying to get everyone on her side and force you to apologize." My heart started pounding. A family meeting. That was classic Diane, turning a problem she caused into a big dramatic event where she could play the victim. "Did she invite me?" I asked. Laura's voice was careful. "Not exactly. She said you can come if you're ready to admit you overreacted." I laughed bitterly. "So it's not really a meeting, it's a trial." Laura lowered her voice. "I think she's telling everyone her version of Christmas Day, that she accidentally forgot Jacob's gift and you blew up on her after." I felt heat rising in my chest. "That's not what happened, and she knows it." "I know," Laura said quickly, "but some of them believe her." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, the laundry forgotten. Mark came in from the garage and saw my face. "What happened?" I told him, and he immediately shook his head. "You're not going to that, right? It's a setup." I knew he was right, but part of me wanted to walk in there and tell my side. The problem was I knew Diane. She would twist every word I said, and somehow I'd come out looking worse. That night, after Jacob was asleep, I sat with Mark at the kitchen table. "If I don't go, they'll say I'm hiding something," I said. "If I do go, they'll gang up on me." Mark leaned back in his chair. "So don't go, let them talk. The people who matter will come to you for the truth." It sounded logical, but my heart still ached. This was my family. People I grew up with. And now there was this ugly wall between us because one person couldn't admit she was wrong. Saturday came, and I spent the day trying not to think about what was happening at Grandma. But around 3 p.m., my phone started buzzing with texts. One from my cousin Ashley. "You should be ashamed," Diane tried to make peace and you refused. Another from my uncle. We had a vote. You're out of the Christmas rotation until you apologize. I stared at that one in disbelief. A vote, I said out loud. Mark, who was sitting on the couch, looked up. What vote? I handed him the phone and his face turned red. This is insane, he said. They actually think they can vote you out like this is some reality show. I wanted to laugh at the ridiculousness of it, but my hands were shaking too much. More texts came in over the next hour, some nasty, some passive-aggressive, some pretending to be concerned. Diane hadn't just turned a few people against me, she had gotten a majority. That night I got a call from Grandma. Her voice was tired, like she had been crying. Sarah, honey, I don't agree with how they're handling this, but I think it would be easier for everyone if you just said sorry. My throat tightened. Grandma, I'm not sorry for protecting my son, she sighed. I know, but Diane isn't going to back down and now the family's divided. I'm worried this is going to last forever. I closed my eyes. Then it lasts forever. There was a long pause before she said softly, I love you, and hung up. Over the next few days, the silence from certain relatives was deafening. No calls, no texts, no invitations to the usual family dinners. It was like I had been cut out completely. I told myself it didn't matter, that the only thing that mattered was Jacob's safety and happiness. But late at night, when the house was quiet, I felt the weight of the loss. I kept picturing Jacob years from now, asking why we don't see certain relatives anymore, and I knew I'd have to tell him the truth someday. But then something happened that reminded me why I was doing this. One afternoon, Jacob came home from school holding a drawing he had made. It was our little family, me, Mark, and him, standing in front of our house with snow falling around us. Above it, he had written in big letters, MY Family Forever. I knelt down and hugged him, tears filling my eyes. That's right, buddy, forever. That picture went straight on the fridge, and every time I looked at it, I felt stronger. Still, Diane wasn't done. A week later, I found out she had started telling people outside the family, mutual friends, neighbors, that I was unstable and had overreacted because of personal issues. She even hinted that I was too sensitive because of Jacob's adoption. That was the last straw. I realized that if she was willing to spread lies beyond the family, then this wasn't just about Christmas anymore. This was about her trying to destroy my reputation. I talked to Mark about it, and we decided to quietly distance ourselves from everyone who was repeating her stories. We also decided to make new traditions with people who truly cared about us, friends who felt like family, not just shared DNA. We started planning a spring barbecue and invited only the people who had supported us through the drama. No guilt, no politics, no walking on eggshells, just real love. The night before the barbecue, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the snow melt into little rivers along the street. I thought about how different life felt now. Smaller, yes, but also warmer, safer. And I knew that if protecting Jacob meant having a smaller circle, then so be it. But deep down, I also knew Diane wasn't done. People like her didn't stop until they got the reaction they wanted. And I had a feeling she was going to make one last move, something big, something public. I just didn't know when or how. It was late February when Diane finally made her big move, and when it happened, it was worse than I expected. Until then, she had been spreading her version of the story quietly, through phone calls, texts, and private conversations, but this time she decided to go public. One Friday morning, I woke up to a dozen missed calls and even more text messages from friends. At first, I thought something terrible had happened to a family member, but when I opened my phone, my jaw dropped. Diane had posted a long, emotional story on Facebook with a picture from our Christmas party. It showed all the kids sitting by the tree, and there was Jacob in the background, looking down at the floor. She had written a huge paragraph claiming she accidentally forgot one gift, and that I used it as an excuse to cut her off and destroy family traditions. She even wrote, I love Jacob like my own, but some people just want drama instead of forgiveness. My stomach twisted in disgust. Not only was she lying, but she was also using a picture of my son without my permission to push her fake story. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments, some supporting her, others asking questions, but the damage was done. People who didn't even know us were chiming in, saying things like, kids should never be caught in the middle, and family fights are so petty. My hands shook as I scrolled, and my heart raced with anger. I wanted to type out the truth, to tell everyone exactly what she said to Jacob that day, but Mark put his hand on my shoulder and said, Don't feed her. She wants you to react publicly so she can twist it even more." He was right, but it was so hard to stay silent when lies were spreading like wildfire. Instead, I took screenshots of everything, her post, the comments, the timestamp. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I wanted proof. By noon, more people started texting me, asking for my side of the story. Some were kind, but others were clearly fishing for drama. One even said, "Well, if you won't explain, I guess Diane's version is all we have to go on." That one stung, but it also lit a fire in me. I decided I wasn't going to post a public rant, but I wasn't going to let her completely control the narrative either. That weekend, I invited a few close relatives who still supported me over for dinner: my parents, my brother, and my cousin Laura. Over pasta and wine, I told them exactly what happened on Christmas, word for word, detail for detail. I told them how Jacob asked me if it was because he was adopted. I told them how Diane didn't show a shred of regret. I told them how she was still lying to protect her image. They sat there in silence, and when I finished, my mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "Sarah," she said, "I'm so sorry. I wish I could erase that moment for you and Jacob." My dad shook his head in anger. "I don't care if she's my sister. That was evil." Laura leaned in. "You know, if you give me permission, I can tell people the real story. Not a Facebook post, but privately, one by one. Sometimes the truth spreads better that way." I thought about it for a moment. Diane had been using loud, public lies. Maybe a quiet, steady truth would be stronger. "Do it," I said. Over the next few weeks, Laura started talking to people. Slowly, I noticed a shift. A few relatives who had been silent started reaching out again, not all, but some. One of my aunts called me and said, "I heard what really happened. I'm sorry for believing her at first." It wasn't everyone, but it was something. Meanwhile, Diane's post started losing steam. The comments slowed down. People moved on to other topics, but she wasn't done trying to provoke me. In early March, I got an invitation in the mail for my cousin Ashley's baby shower. Normally, I'd be excited, but my stomach dropped when I saw that it was being hosted at Diane's house. I stared at the invite for a long time. Mark walked in and saw it. "You're not going, right?" I shook my head slowly. "I want to be there for Ashley, but I know if I show up, Diane will make a scene." I decided to call Ashley directly. "Hey, I got your invite," I said. "I want to celebrate you, but with everything going on, I don't think it's a good idea for me to come to Diane's house." Ashley was quiet for a moment. "I understand," she said softly. "Honestly, I didn't even think about the drama when I said yes to her hosting. I just didn't want to say no to her." That told me everything I needed to know. People were still scared to stand up to Diane. Even when they didn't agree with her, they let her control situations because it was easier than dealing with her wrath. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about what happened to Jacob. Diane had been controlling the family for years with her loud personality and manipulative tactics. I had just been the first one to tell her no in a serious way. That night, Mark and I talked for hours. "What if we just stop trying with the ones who won't listen?" he suggested. "We build a circle of people who really care about us, and we let the rest go." It was tempting, but I also knew Jacob loved some of those relatives who were still stuck in Diane's shadow. I didn't want to cut him off from them completely unless I had to. So I decided to wait to see how things played out. But in the back of my mind, I knew Diane wasn't going to quietly fade away. She had tried going public once. If she felt like she was losing her grip, she might try something even bigger, and maybe even nastier, next time. And I had to be ready for that moment when it came. It was mid-April when I learned just how far Diane was willing to go, and even now, thinking about it still makes my blood boil. For weeks after her Facebook post had died down, I thought maybe she had finally moved on, or at least gotten bored of dragging my name through the mud. But I should have known better. Diane never truly lets go of anything, especially if she feels like she lost. It started with something small. Jacob's school was hosting their annual spring fair, and he was excited about it for weeks. He had been practicing a little song with his class and kept telling me, "Mom, you have to be there in the front row." I promised him I wouldn't miss it for the world. On the morning of the fair, Mark and I dropped him off early so he could help set up. We planned to come back later for the performances. When we arrived, the parking lot was packed, and I could see families streaming toward the school gym. But as soon as I stepped inside, I froze. There, sitting in the front row with an over-the-top smile plastered on her face, was Diane. She waved at me like nothing had ever happened. My heart pounded, but I ignored her and focused on finding a seat. Mark muttered, "Of course she's here. under his breath. But then, during the break before Jacob's class went on stage, I saw something that made me clench my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. Diane was talking to one of Jacob's classmates' moms, loudly enough for people nearby to hear. "It's so sweet of me to still support Jacob even though Sarah won't speak to me," she said in this fake, angelic tone. "I mean, blood or not, he's still kind of family, you know? Kind of family." Those two words felt like poison. I saw Jacob glance over at her while getting ready backstage, his smile fading just a little. That was when I decided I wasn't going to stand there quietly anymore. After the performance, which Jacob nailed, by the way, I walked right up to Diane in front of everyone. "We need to talk," I said. Her smile didn't even flicker. "About what?" she asked innocently. "About you using every opportunity to undermine my family while pretending to be the hero," I said. "This ends now, Diane. If you can't respect me and Jacob, then you stay out of our lives completely. No pretending, no backhanded comments, nothing." She laughed softly, but her eyes were cold. "Oh, Sarah, you're so dramatic. People are going to think you're unstable if you keep this up." I could feel other parents watching us, but I didn't care. "Let them think whatever they want," I said. "I know the truth, and so does my son. You don't get to define our family anymore." Then I walked away before she could say another word. I thought maybe that confrontation would be the final straw for her, but instead, it seemed to push her into full attack mode. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my boss asking if everything was okay at home. Confused, I said yes, and then she told me something that made my skin crawl. Someone had emailed the HR department claiming I was mentally unstable and unfit to care for a child. My stomach dropped. "Do you know who sent it?" I asked. My boss said the email was anonymous, but it didn't take a genius to figure out who had the motive. Diane knew exactly where I worked. She knew exactly how to hit me where it hurt. I spent the next hour in the HR office explaining the situation. Thankfully, my boss believed me, especially after I showed her the screenshots of Diane's public lies, but still, the fact that she had tried to damage my career made my hands shake with rage. That night, I told Mark everything, and we sat at the kitchen table in silence for a long time. "She's not going to stop," I finally said. "She's trying to make my life miserable in every way she can." Mark nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we stop playing defense. Maybe it's time we end this for good." His words hung in the air. I knew he didn't mean anything illegal or dangerous, but I also knew ending it would mean cutting her out completely, not just from me, but from Jacob, too. I wrestled with that for days. Jacob still asked about her sometimes, even though he didn't see her often. Part of me worried he'd resent me for cutting ties completely, but another part of me knew it was the only way to protect him. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon when Jacob came into the kitchen holding a card. "This was in the mailbox," he said. I took it from him and saw Diane's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a birthday card, not for me, not for Mark, but for Jacob. It looked sweet at first glance, but when I opened it, my stomach turned. She had written, "No matter what your mom says, I'll always care about you, even if I'm not your real family." I swear I saw red. That was it. The last straw. I sat Jacob down and explained that we weren't going to be seeing Diane anymore, and that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, and when they don't say sorry, the safest thing is to stay away. He nodded quietly, and I could see he was holding back tears, but he didn't argue. That night, I blocked Diane on every platform. I told mutual family members that if they wanted to stay in touch with us, they could, but we would no longer be attending any events where she was present. Some pushed back, saying I was overreacting or making things awkward. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't doing this to make my life easier. I was doing it to protect my son. The next few weeks were quiet, almost eerily so. I half expected Diane to try one more stunt, but she didn't. Maybe she realized she had lost her power over us, or maybe she was just waiting for another opportunity. Either way, I didn't care. I was done letting her take up space in my head. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. And more importantly, Jacob seemed lighter too. He stopped asking about her. He smiled more. We started planning a summer trip, just the three of us, somewhere far away from all the family drama. And as I packed our bags, I thought about how something as small as a missing Christmas gift had spiraled into months of chaos. But in a strange way, I was grateful for it, because it had finally shown me who Diane really was and given me the strength to walk away for good. After cutting Diane out, the house felt calmer, but the shadow she had left lingered for a while. It's strange how one person's absence can be both a relief and a reminder of everything they put you through. For the first few weeks, I kept half expecting the phone to ring or a knock to come at the door with some new drama she had cooked up. But the days passed quietly, and the quiet became something I clung to. Jacob seemed happier, lighter, and more focused on school and his hobbies. He'd talk to me about his art projects or show me the latest Lego tower he had built, and I realized how much mental space Diane had stolen from both of us. Mark noticed it too. "It's like we finally have our home back," he said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. I nodded, sipping my tea, thinking about how far we had come since that awful Christmas. But cutting someone out of your life isn't like flipping a switch. The people around you still have opinions. Some relatives kept trying to mediate, insisting that family is family and that I should find a way to forgive. I started hearing little rumors, how Diane had told people I was overly sensitive or holding a grudge over a misunderstanding. At first, it got under my skin. I'd find myself replaying old conversations, wondering if maybe I had been too harsh. But then I'd remember Jacob's face the day she refused him a gift, or the card she sent with those words about real family, and the guilt would dissolve. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was protecting my child. In May, there was a big family wedding on Mark's side. We were invited, but I knew Diane would be there. Mark asked if I wanted to skip it, but I told him no. I wasn't going to hide from her anymore. If she wanted to make me uncomfortable, she would have to look me in the eye while doing it. When we arrived at the venue, it was already buzzing with music and chatter. I spotted Diane across the room almost immediately. She was surrounded by a small group, laughing loudly like she owned the place. The moment her eyes met mine, I saw the flicker of surprise, maybe even irritation, but I kept my head high and walked past her without stopping. For the rest of the night, I focused on enjoying myself. I danced with Jacob, took pictures with relatives I actually liked, and made sure Diane's presence didn't steal 1 second of my joy. And you know what? She didn't approach me once. Maybe she had finally gotten the message. Summer came, and with it, our long-awaited trip. We drove to a small coastal town in Maine, renting a little cabin by the water. It was everything I needed: quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons exploring the rocky beaches, evenings watching Jacob chase fireflies. One night, as we sat by a campfire roasting marshmallows, Jacob looked at me and said, "Mom, I like it better when it's just us and Dad." I smiled, feeling a lump in my throat. "Me too, buddy," I said. That trip became a turning point. I realized that peace isn't just something that happens. It's something you fight for, protect, and sometimes even cut people out to maintain. I had spent so long worrying about how cutting Diane out would affect Jacob, but the truth was, it had freed him. He no longer had to wonder why someone treated him differently or hear subtle digs about being adopted. He could just be a kid, loved for exactly who he was. By the time we got home, I had stopped checking over my shoulder for Diane's next move. She still existed, but not in my life, not in my home, and not in my head. Every now and then, I'd hear her name in passing from another family member, but it didn't sting anymore. She was just someone I used to know. In late August, I got a message from a cousin saying Diane had been asking about me and Jacob. "She says she wants to make things right," my cousin wrote. I stared at the message for a while before responding with 3 words. "Too late now," because it was. Apologies are only meaningful when they come before the damage becomes permanent. Diane had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, and I wasn't about to open the door for her to do it again. September rolled around, and with it, Jacob's birthday. We threw him a party in the backyard with his friends from school. As I watched him laugh and run around, surrounded by people who cared about him without conditions, I felt this deep sense of contentment. It hit me then. Family isn't about blood or titles. It's about the people who show up for you with love, respect, and consistency. That's what I wanted Jacob to grow up understanding. That's the legacy I wanted to leave for him. The holiday season came back around faster than I expected. As December approached, I couldn't help but think about the year before, the awkward silence, the sting of Diane's words, the tension that had stretched across the months. But this Christmas was different. This time, our living room was filled with warmth, laughter, and wrapping paper flying everywhere. Jacob tore into his presence with pure joy, and I sat there soaking in every moment. No drama, no insults disguised as tradition, just love. After dinner, as we sat by the tree, Mark squeezed my hand and said, We did the right thing. I smiled, knowing he was right. I realized that walking away from someone who refuses to change isn't weakness, it's strength. It's setting the example for my son that he never has to tolerate disrespect, no matter who it comes from. That night, I tucked Jacob into bed and stood in his doorway for a moment, watching him drift off. I thought about how far we had come in 1 year, from that awful Christmas morning to this peaceful one. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to look back. Diane could keep telling whatever story she wanted. She could keep playing the victim in her version of events. But in my home, in my heart, the truth was crystal clear. We were better off without her. And that was all that mattered. I walked back to the living room, turned off the Christmas lights, and whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas, Sarah, you made it." And I knew, deep down, I had finally won, not by fighting her, but by removing her power over my life forever.